Hey guys, Rich from Rich Mid Gaming. Hope everyone is doing fantastically well. Welcome to this, another Star Wars Shatterpoint video. And with the beginners series completely finished now, all 10 episodes, you can go and check that out. There'll be a link down in the description below. I thought we'd do something a little bit different, and I thought we'd take a look at all of the units that we've got upon release of the game. So that's going to be the core box and the two expansions, one for Obi-Wan and one for Dooku, and see which of those units is able to dish out the most damage in a single activation. So damage is obviously a very important part of the game. I would say it's not the most important part. Definitely, scoring the VPs, positioning, movement, all those sorts of things, I think is far more important. But let's take a look at what affects damage. So we've got Darth Maul's stance card here. So the first thing that's going to affect the amount of damage that you're able to do is obviously the amount of die that you are rolling. As we can see here that Maul has got 7 for range attacks, and he's got 6 for melee attacks, at least on this side of his stance card. The next then is going to be the number of options on a unit's combat tree, and also what those options are. You can see Maul has got access to quite a lot of damage on those 6 options that he's got. You'll see other characters with fewer options, with more damage, fewer options with less damage, a real mix and match. We've then got damage from expertise. So this is additional damage that you do when you roll the corresponding number of expertise dice. And then we've also got access to any active, reactive, or indeed innate abilities. So if we take a look here at Gar Saxon, Merciless Commander, he's got the innate ability, I've got you in my sights. So this gives him Sharpshooter 2, and your target doesn't benefit from cover. And actually, when it focuses, he also gets a hunker. That's somewhat by the by. So there's all of these things that we need to take into consideration when we're looking at how much damage an individual unit can do. Now, how are we calculating these? So we're setting some rules up so that it's a completely fair test. So the first thing is each attacking unit will have made a focus action before they attack. So this will give everybody that 1 extra attack die, but it will also trigger any keywords such as sharpshooter or impact that unit may have. I've also assumed that each unit will have access to as much force power as needed to trigger any active or reactive abilities. And we're going to look at not only the maximum amount of damage that a unit can achieve during a single activation, but also the percentage of successes needed to achieve that damage. So, for example, you may be rolling 10 dice, and if you need all of those 10 dice to be able to achieve the maximum damage, it's very, very unlikely that you're going to get that on a regular basis. So it will give us an idea about consistency and how viable it is to achieve that damage. So starting off then, let's take a look at the range result, because we have split this down into ranged and melee. So starting off, we've got the axis going from top to bottom. 25, 75, and 100%. This is how many successes relative to their, to the actual attack pool that we're forming that particular unit needs to achieve this particular amount of damage. And then across the bottom there, 5, 10, 15, and 20 is the maximum amount of damage that single unit can make. So starting out then, let's take a look at the 5 First Troopers. They're obviously a support unit, so we're not expecting huge damage output from these guys. They've got a native 7, which will go up to 8, but they do only have 5 options on there. And those 5 options are going to give them a maximum of 5 damage, but they are only going to need to use 62.5% of those dice that they've got, so needing essentially 5 successes out of 8, making it pretty consistent. Next up then, we have got the Clan Kryze Mandalorians coming in ever so slightly better when it comes to potential range damage even than the 5 First. These guys are going to be able to do 6 damage in total, but once again needing 62.5%. Let's take a look then at the other clones. We've got the 212th Legion clone troopers. Now, only 4 options on here, but you'll notice they've got an extra 2 damage on that expertise, meaning that if they do roll a perfect combination of 4 expertise and indeed 3 other successes that they've got, it'll give them use all 7 dice that they've got access to, but it will allow them to do a maximum damage of 8, so the highest so far of any of the support units, but they are going to need 100% of those dice. And as I mentioned, in that particular order, they need 4 expertise and then 3 of anything else that goes through. Let's move on to the dark side of the support units then, starting out with the B1 battle droids. I think for the money at the moment, some of the best support units in the game. They've got a good number of dice. They're also going to benefit from that focus, and we've also let them get an extra die here from Kalani's ability, giving them 1 extra die globally if there's somebody else within range 4 or another battle droid unit within range 4 of the target character. So usually you have it set up in such a way that, you know, this is most definitely possible. These guys are going to equal the 212th for maximum damage output, but they're only going to need 55.56 of their results going through. Now, I want to take a moment at this point because you've got a big sort of difference there between the 212 and between the battle droids. You'll notice the battle droids have 0 access to any crits outside of any natural crits that they roll. So whilst they've got the potential to be able to do, you know, as much damage for less, they're also going to be significantly easier to block. But we're not taking blocks into account in this particular setup. We're just looking at the maximum damage output that a single unit can do. And then rounding out the support units, we do have the Mandalorian Super Commandos. Now, these guys are more of a melee focus, but they are going to be able to dish out a total of 7 damage, but they are going to need 83.33%, very precise, of their dice pool to be successes to get that through. Let's move on then to the light side secondaries, starting with Captain Rex. He's going to be able to do a maximum damage output of 7, and he's going to need 62.5%. Again, that's pretty consistent, which is quite nice there. We've also then got Bo-Katan Kryze. She's coming in with being able to do a maximum of 8 damage, so a little bit better than Rex when it comes to ranged attacks, but she is going to need 71.43% of those dice results to go through. And then rounding out the light side support unit, for the moment at least, is we do have Clone Commander Cody, who is very much a range specialist. You know, the 212 was sort of the sniper units, if you like, for the clone troopers. He's also going to be able to do a maximum of 10. Sorry, he's going to be able to do a maximum of 10 damage, but he is going to need 100% of his results to be able to get that damage through. Onto the dark side of the secondary units, and the most expensive secondary unit that we've got in the game at the moment, costing 5 points. However, he is worth every single point in my opinion. He does so much as a actual more of a support unit in the game, really, rather than a secondary, but he's supporting those droid units, giving them more dice. Roger is a great ability, but we're not here to look at that. We're here to look at his damage output. So even with all the amazing stuff that he does for everybody else, his ranged attacks are still very good. He's going to be able to do a maximum of 9 damage, but once again, only needing 55.56% of those results to go through. So very strong indeed. Next up, we've got Gar Saxon, again, another range specialist. He's got that sharpshooter 2 there, giving him some extra dice, taking up to 9 dice in total on those ranged attacks. He's going to be able to do a maximum of 8 damage and needing 55.56%. And then rounding out the dark side secondaries, we have got Jango Fett, Bounty Hunter, everyone's second favourite Bounty Hunter. Jango's got some really good damage output. He's going to be able to dish out a maximum of 10 damage in total, but only needing 71.43% of results to go through. So as much damage as Cody, but not needing anywhere near the number of results to go through. Next up then is Lord Maul, the only primary character in the core box that has a ranged attack, and it's going to be on his sinister cunning side of his card. You flip it around Dark Road, you don't get access to it, but he has access to that throne lightsaber. Now he's not going to get any benefit from anything else here because his identity doesn't work with ranged attacks, but he's going to be able to do a maximum of 12 damage with that thrown lightsaber. It can be absolutely brutal. Remembering that it still triggers all of the pushes and everything else that you get to do with it, even though it's a ranged attack. But as you can see, he is going to need 100% of those results to go through. And once again, he's going to be in a position where he needs a specific set of results for this to be possible. So highly, highly unlikely, but it's still very, very good damage output. And then the only other primary in the game, at least right now, that has access to a ranged attack is Count Dooku, leader of the Separatists, with that Force Lightning. He actually has this on both sides of his card, so we're going to take a look at both. On the Force Mastery side, he's going to get more access to more dice, but he's going to be able to do a maximum of 11 damage, needing 77.78. But if we do flip over to his form to Makashi, that damage output does increase, so he has access to a higher potential output, but he does need better results to be able to achieve that. So 11 damage maximum output, needing 85.71%. Okay, so on to the melee results now, and obviously every single character in the game has access to a melee attack. It's just a thing that they all have. So let's take a look then. We've got the same grid again. So remembering that the higher up the grid somebody is, the less consistent that damage is going to be. The further down to the bottom, the more consistent. And then from left to right even, the further along the track you go is going to be your maximum damage that you can do. So the further across and down you are, the more consistent and the more damage you have got. So starting off then with the 501st Clone Troopers. They do lose 2 die on their melee attacks. They're most definitely better at range. However, it doesn't decrease their maximum damage, but it does increase the percentage that they need. So they can still do 5 damage, but it goes from, 62 something, all the way up to 83.33% needed. Similar story really for the Clan Kryze Mandalorians. They do drop a die. And again, they're going to be able to do that same damage output of 6, but once again, they go up to 83.33%. And then rounding out the light side for the support units, we've got the 212 Clone Troopers. Again, they drop 2 die, and you can see where these guys are really range specialists. That bash only giving them 1 extra strike for all of those potential expertise that you roll. They're going to drop down in damage quite a bit. They're going to be able to do 6 damage in total, but needing 80%. So a little bit more consistent than the Clan Kryze, but you really want these guys further back on your field, holding those back objectives and being able to dish out that damage from afar. Let's take a look then at the B1 battle droids and see how they fare. So they've still got pretty good damage output, so they're going to be able to do a maximum of 8 damage, but they are going to need 71.43%. And we've already said it, crits can't be blocked, strikes can be blocked. So whilst this is maximum potential damage, what you will find in a game is that the B1s, because they don't have access to those crits, at least via the expertise, they're going to be far less efficient at actually getting those final successes through. And on to the melee specialists for the dark side, at least in the core box, the Mandalorian Super Commandos, not the Super Mandalorian Commandos. They've got their flamethrower that they're going to be using. They do also have Impact 1, which is going to give them an extra die when they make that focus attack. So they're going to be able to do 7 damage in total, but very, very consistently at 62.5%. So once you get these guys up close and personal, that's really where you want them. They're able to do some really, really good consistent damage. They've also got some really nice conditions that they can dish out, such as that strain, disarm, expose, and if you get far enough along, a couple of pushes there as well. And then rounding out the support units, one that we haven't seen yet because they don't have access to a ranged attack, is the Magna Guard. Some of my favourite, if not my favourite, support units in the game at the moment. Very, very consistent with the damage that they output because of access to all of those crits. But I love the fact that they have got 2 shoves on their first 2 options that they have there. So pretty much guaranteeing you to be able to get somebody off a point, unless they've got something like steadfast or something like that. But they're going to be able to do a maximum of 6 damage. So not huge damage dealers. However, very, very consistent, as they only need 50% of those results to go through to be able to achieve that damage. Back around to the secondaries then, and we do have Captain Rex. Captain Rex is going to come in. He is exactly the same on his attacks, on his melee as he is ranged. And actually, if you take a look at the D17 blaster pistols, apparently he's just whacking somebody over the head with them, but it's the exact same expertise chart as well. So he's going to be able to do a maximum of 7 damage, needing 62.5%. Next up, Bo-Katan Kryze, up close and personal. She's going to be able to do a maximum of 9 damage. So she actually goes up quite considerable when she does get up close and personal. You can see there she's got an extra die. She's also got some damage if she's able to roll 4 expertise, which is very, very nice. But as you can see, she does need 87.5% of results to go through. But a lot of the damage is front loaded as well. So, you're not losing out on a lot if you only make 2 or 3 successes through there. So still pretty consistent. And next up then, the range specialist clone Commander Cody. And as we'd expect, his potential damage output does drop significantly because he doesn't have access to that extra damage on his expertise tree. So he's going to drop down to 8 damage is his maximum, needing 85.71. So a little bit more consistent, but nowhere near as good as he is at range. Okay, let's take a look then at Kalani Super Tactical Droid. We know he's pretty good at range attacks, and he's still pretty damn good up close and in melee. So he's going to be able to do 9 damage in total, needing 62.5% of those results to go through. The one thing I will say, however, is you probably don't want Kalani up close and personal. Only getting 3 defense dice on something that costs 5 feels a little bit bad. Or at the very least, you probably want a Magna Guard close by so that it forces your opponent to take a swipe into them instead. Next up then, we have got Gar Saxon, Merciless Commander. Again, a bit more of a ranged specialist unit. He loses that sharpshooter, obviously, because he doesn't have access to it. But he does have access to an extra damage there with his Westar blaster pistols. He's going to be able to do a maximum of 9 damage, needing 87.5% of those results going through. And rounding out all of the secondary units is Jango Fett, Bounty Hunter. This guy's actually pretty good up close and personal. He's got that extra damage you can see there from his modified blaster pistol. He's going to be able to do a maximum of 11 damage, coming in and needing 85.71% of those results to go through. Okay, then on to the first of the big hitters. It is General Anakin Skywalker in his Form 5 gem. So, and as we'd expect now, we're starting to get into big damage and also consistent damage. You know, you see on the primary units, their expertise tends to be laden with a lot more crits rather than strikes, meaning that it's impossible to block them. But in his gem, so Anakin's going to be able to dish out a maximum of 10 damage, needing 66.67%. But you can see a lot of the damage on this. You know, we've got 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 damage just from 3 results. So very consistent when it comes to damage. Probably, at least in my books, the most consistent damage dealer of all of the primaries at the moment. But let's take a look when he flips into his Form 5 Shien. This is more defensive. So his damage does drop a little bit. So he's got a maximum damage output there of 8. But he is that little bit more consistent, only needing 62.5% of those results to go through. Anakin's counterparts in the core box, Ahsoka Tano, Jedi No More, in her Form 5 Shien Reverse Grip. She's going to be able to do a maximum of 8 damage, but needing 71.43%. And again, this is her more defensive stance that she has got. So when we flip her over into her Jarkai form, which is most definitely the more aggressive of the two, you can see the difference in dice there. She's going to be able to do a maximum of 9 damage, needing 62.5% of those results to go through. So again, you can look at that and see it's quite front loaded as well. 5 damage of that 9 from just getting 3 results, which is really easy to do with her, especially when you're getting the crits there from the expertise roll. So very consistent in damage. Let's go on to Obi-Wan Kenobi, or General Obi-Wan Kenobi, should I say. Now, Obi-Wan is one of the lower damage output characters from the primary units. But what we'll see is he is very consistent. So his Form 3 Soresu is only going to have a maximum damage output of 7, but he only needs 44.44% of the dice to go through. And the reason for that is that hello there ability, one of the best active abilities, at least in my opinion, on any primary character. It allows you to do a jump. It costs 1 force, so exactly the same cost as all of the other jumps out there, but the next attack you make is adding 3 dice in. So in this particular instance, Obi-Wan's going from 5 up to 8 up to 9, and with only 4 options on his tree, it doesn't take him very long, or it doesn't take him very many successes to get through from beginning to end. If we flip over then and put him in his Form 4 Ataru, his damage output is going to increase by 1, so he's going to be able to do a maximum of 9 damage. He's going to need to be a little bit more consistent, meaning that he needs 45.545%, but even so, below 50%, you're going to be disappointed when you're not getting good consistent results from Obi-Wan. I think that's the thing with him. Anakin and some of these other primaries have huge, bigger potential damage output, but Obi-Wan's going to be very consistent with what he does. Let's jump over then and take a look at the dark side of the box. Starting off with Asajj Ventress, Sith Assassin, in her Form 2 Makashi. Again, this is the one it's a little bit strange on Asajj, whereas there's very clear defensive and offensive ones. For me, Form 2 Makashi is just not as good as her alternative option. She's got the 7 dice, but again, only having 4 options on there. She's going to be able to do a maximum of 6 damage, but only needs 50% of those results to go through. But you can see her actual tree there is laden with lots of other things. This is really more about healing. So whilst this is defensive, offensively defensive, if that makes sense. Is going to be able to heal up lots of characters around her. I don't like her defensive stance on this one. I really, really don't like it. I think she's very, very susceptible. And we'll see why when we take a look over at her Jarkai. That aggressive defense, I know I'm going off piece there a second, but that aggressive defense for me is significantly better. So Jarkai is the one where I tend to see, or I tend to play Asajj in more. However, let's take a look at the damage output. She's going to be able to do a maximum of 9, so an increase by 50%, which is absolutely huge. Biggest swing from one side to the other of any of these stance cards, of any of these characters. She's going to need a little bit more in terms of results. As you can see there, she's got 6 options versus the 4, but it's still only 66.67% of results. And with access to all of those crits, again, I think you can feel pretty hard done by if you don't make a good roll with Asajj. Let's take a look then at her counterpart even in the core box, Lord Maul, starting on his Dark Rage side. Lord Maul, obviously 7 attack dice. You can see all of that extra damage that he gets there from that double-bladed lightsaber, which is really, really going to help him with his damage output to the point where he has, at least up until now, the highest potential damage output of any unit in the game, giving him a maximum of 12. If we take a look at his other side, Sinister Cunning, he does drop in terms of potential damage output. It's only 11, but this, along with Dark Rage, both need 100% of those results to go through to be able to achieve that maximum damage. And rounding it out then with Count Dooku, leader of the Separatists. Force Mastery, he's going to be able to do a maximum of 7 damage at 71.43%. But if we switch him over to his Form 2 Makashi, you can see he's getting extra dice. He's also got all of those crits that he's got access to, plus some extra options on his tree, meaning he's going to be able to do a maximum of 10 damage, needing 62.5%. So actually a little bit more consistent than Anakin. I'd like to take a minute to thank the brand new sponsor of the channel, Loyalist Games. Loyalist are a great local gaming store in West Yorkshire. They stock all of your favourite MCP and Shatterpoint products, plus a huge range of other gaming systems. They also have an awesome gaming space where weekly events are held. We've already been running our MCP League that's coming into its 4th season. We've hosted a number of MCP events, and we'll be doing so for Shatterpoint as well. So hopefully we can see you guys there at some of the events in the future. There'll be a link down in the description below, and if you're looking for a place to get all of your hobbying purchases at a great price, then look no further than Loyalist Games. But hold on a minute, guys, because this does not paint the full picture. We're talking about making a combat action, and as we know, when we make a combat action, every character in that unit gets to make an attack, whether it be ranged or melee. And as we know, every single support unit in this game right now is made up of 2 characters. That could be more, that could be less in the future. We already know there's going to be more in some and less in others, but it means that they get to essentially double tap. Now for this, the next part of this experiment, we're going to see some numbers that go over the maximum amount of damage that a single character can take, but I want to show you how important it is when we start talking about support units and when we're double tapping the same character, because you'll see how that potential damage output can increase quite significantly. Plus there's a couple of other things in there as well. So let's start off again with the ranged attacks. This is how our chart looked previously, but let's take a look then at the 501st Clone Troopers. Their maximum damage previously was going to be 5, that was going along the middle, but you'll notice there are 2 conditions there that are being given out. We've got that pin and we have got that strain. Now we'll have already applied those 2 in the previous attack, meaning that we're actually getting some extra damage on the follow-up, pushing their total damage from 5 when it's one of them up to 12 damage in total. So pretty darn good. Same thing happens for the Clan Kryze Mandalorians. They're going to go from 6 damage output or potential output all the way up to 14 damage when you double tap that same target. Remember that a support unit also shares that focus as well, so they're both going to get the extra dice from that attack. Let's take a look then at the 212 clone troopers. Well, their damage goes through the roof. They were down at 8 previously because of those two conditions that they are dishing out and all of that extra damage on the expertise. They're going to go all the way up to 18 damage in total as their potential maximum output. However, before we move on to the dark side of the support unit, I want to throw another wrench in there because we do have a certain second in command, Mr. Captain Rex, who has got I'm always first kid. So essentially when another clone trooper supporting unit, so in this case that's going to be the 212th or the 501st, if they make an attack, he is going to be able to follow up and do either a ranged or a melee attack. So for this one, we've done ranged. Now we know from previously that Rex is able to do 7 damage himself. So actually when we add that 7 damage onto the 501st clone troopers, their potential damage output is going to shoot up all the way to 19. And when we do it for the 212th, these guys are off the chart. They go up to 25 maximum potential damage in that single combat action activation, whatever it is you want to call it. Let's move on then to the B1 battle droids. They're going to go from 8 maximum damage all the way up to 17, once again because of those conditions that they're dishing out. And then rounding out the list, the Mandalorian Super Commandos, they were at 7, they're going to go all the way up to 16. And last up then is Kalani Super Tactical Droid. Now you may be thinking, Rich, Kalani is only a single character, he can't double tap, that's just not possible. Well, however, he does have an active ability called Tactical Network, which would normally cost a power, but because we've triggered it on his tree, we're going to get it for free. So we're going to include it in the maximum damage output that Kalani can do in a single activation because it's part of his activation. So because this is ranged, we're going to go with the B1s. So we're going to add the B1s into the mix. And when we put that into consideration, Kalani's maximum damage output at range goes from being 9 all the way up to 17 damage. So pretty darn good indeed. Okay, so let's take a look at the melee results and applying some of these things, plus again a couple of others to see where we are at. So starting again with the 501st Clone Troopers, remembering we're going to get the I'm always first kid from Rex at the back end of this. Is going to push their damage up from 5 when it's a single character attacking, all the way up to 19 damage in total, again in a single activation, which is pretty crazy. The Clan Kryze Mandalorians are going to go all the way up from 6 up to 14 damage. The 212 Clone Troopers are going to go from 6 all the way up to 21 damage. So once again, almost off the chart. The Battle Droids, it's a similar story, guys. They're going to go from 8 all the way up to 17. The Mandalorian Super Commandos, once again, they're going to go from 7 all the way up to 16. And then rounding out the support unit is the Magna Guard. They're going to go from 6 damage all the way up to 13. Not forgetting about all of those pushers on there as well, which are really, really nice. Let's take a look then at Kalani Super Tactical Droid. We already know that he's got that ability that we're triggering. And because this one's melee, I thought I'd mix it up and throw the Magna Guard in here as well. He's going to go all the way from 9 up to 15 damage in total. And then we're getting on to some of the bigger hitters. General Anakin Skywalker. He has an ability called I'm going to end this. After he ends a combat action, he can then spend 2 force power and double tap that character. hugely increasing his damage output. It's why he is one of the best primaries in the game, in my opinion. Starting on that Form 5 gem, so we're going to go from 10 damage all the way up to 22. He's going to benefit there from a couple of the conditions that he can dish out. So if we flip over to his Form 5 Shien, he's going to go from 8 damage all the way up to 16 damage potential output. Okay, so last but by no means least, let's take a look at Lord Maul. Now, slightly different here, because what we're actually going to be doing here is sustaining ourselves by rage. So if we take a look at Maul's identity there, essentially, the more damage, the more wounds, the more injured tokens he has, the more die he gets to add into his dice pool when he's making melee attacks. This is why it didn't affect him on the range. And what we've done here is taken worst case or best case scenario, depending on how you look at that. So that is an injured token with 9 damage, at least before we flip him anyway, or at least before we take him off the board. And that's going to reduce the number of successes he needs from 100% all the way down to 57.14%. So that'll be a sliding scale depending on how many extra die you're adding into the pool. And if we flip him over and take a look at Sinister Cunning, not only do we decrease the number of successes needed, we actually get to add on an extra damage as well. So he was able to go from 11 to 12 damage, but going from 100% down to 61.54%. And there we go, guys. This was just a fun little video I wanted to put together just to show the potential damage output. I've seen a lot of things on Facebook talk about how the dark side seem so much more powerful than the light side when it comes to damage output. And I suppose there's a couple of things I want to address with that. Hopefully, as you've seen in this video, that is not necessarily the case. Once you start understanding the synergies of these characters, the keywords, the triggers, once you get your positioning right on these characters and these units when you're in a game, you can really start to snowball with that damage. And even something as simple as a 501st Clone Trooper unit can start to do really good damage output, potentially taking out some of these bigger units that are on the board. The other thing I want to mention as well is I don't believe damage is a big factor in this game. Yes, it is a factor, absolutely. But the other things that characters can do on their combat trees, for me at least, often end up being far more valuable. The disarms, the shoves, the expose to be able to open it up for the next, the next unit or character that's going to make an attack. The repositions off the back end of some of these attacks, the jumps and the full advances that you get to make, for me are far more powerful than just dealing through raw damage. I've mentioned it a couple of times now, but I'm maybe 35, nearly 40 games into this game now. The most number of units that have been taken off the board is, I think, 3. 2 for me and 1 for my opponent. So you're not taking characters off the board very easily. Now, flipping them up, I use the term flipping because of MCP, but adding a wound or an injured token on there does hinder them when it comes to actually using abilities and things like that. But all of the other things for me are just far more important. But as I mentioned, hopefully this gives you guys an idea of what to expect and really help understand how that synergy between all of these different characters really does pay dividends, especially when you start to look at something like the Clone Troopers with Rex. One thing we didn't get into was the coordinated fire thing. It just got a little bit too messy, but you've also got that in there as well. So if you've got a unit making an attack, you've got the Clone Troopers who have got coordinated fire. It seems to be a standard thing that they've got, so they get to add a special condition on prior to the attack taking place, which is really nice as well. But there we go, guys. Hopefully you enjoyed that. Hopefully it was useful. Remember, we are giving away the Obi-Wan and Vader diorama box. I forget the name of it, but when we hit 5,000 subscribers, which we are not very far off now, we will be giving that away. So if you haven't subscribed, make sure you do. If you could also leave a like, it really, really does help. Just generally, apparently the algorithm gods really enjoy it. Another shout out to the guys at Leodis for sponsoring the channel as well. It really, really does help us. And if you want to support us even further, you can do so by heading on over to Patreon, and for as little as £1 a month you can support the channel and help us to continue to make these videos. We've also got our Discord up and running as well, guys. Make sure you head on over and check that out. There's a whole bunch of Shatterpoint stuff on there, and as always, guys, it leaves me with just enough time to say stay well, keep safe, and until next time, may the force be with you.